The secluded military base, nestled in the shadowy depths of the Alaskan wilderness, felt isolated from the rest of the world. As I arrived, the sun was setting, casting long, eerie shadows across the snow-covered grounds. This place, surrounded by dense forests and icy terrain, was like no other I'd been stationed at before. My assignment here was vague: to investigate unusual occurrences, a task that seemed oddly out of place in such a remote location. My first night at the base was quiet, almost too quiet. The next day, as I walked towards the mess hall under the gray Alaskan sky, I noticed something strange. Corporal Jenkins, a seasoned soldier, was heading in the same direction, but behind him was a figure. It mirrored his movements with unsettling precision, a dark, fluid shadow in the stark landscape. I blinked, thinking it was a trick of the light in this harsh environment, but when I looked again, the figure had vanished. Feeling uneasy, I started asking around. It wasn't long before I learned that others had also seen strange figures. These accounts of eerie shadows were whispered among the soldiers, yet no one seemed willing to discuss them openly. That evening, drawn by a mix of curiosity and apprehension, I revisited the spot where I'd seen the shadow. The chill of the Alaskan night seemed to seep into my bones. As I patrolled the area, my breath forming clouds in the cold air, I saw it again, a shadowy figure, this time trailing Sergeant Lewis. It was too tangible to be a mere figment of my imagination, yet too bizarre to be real. I reported my observations to the base commander, a man who seemed as tough and unyielding as the Alaskan wilderness itself. He listened with a skeptical frown, then tasked me with investigating further. Clearly, this wasn't just a case of nerves. Something unexplainable was happening on this remote base. My search led me to a secretive part of the base, hidden away in a less frequented area. There, I found a high-security lab, and inside, an experimental device that hummed with an ominous energy. The papers scattered around described it as a quantum device, designed for purposes that seemed beyond ordinary military use. The scientist responsible for the project was a peculiar figure, his gaunt frame and tired eyes speaking of long hours and relentless dedication. His explanations were laden with complex scientific jargon, yet his demeanor hinted at a deeper mystery. Later, lying awake in my bunk, the revelation struck me. The scientist, he wasn't just the brains behind the device, he was a product of it, a shadow of the real scientist. The realization sent a shiver down my spine, far colder than the Alaskan night outside. As I lay there, the base seemed alive with hidden threats, shadows playing across my room, a silent, mocking dance. It dawned on me that this mission was more than just a standard investigation. I was plunged into a mystery that blurred the lines between reality and the supernatural, deep in the heart of the Alaskan wilderness. The early Alaskan morning was still dark, the sun a mere promise on the horizon. I decided to start my day early, my mind racing with the night's revelations. The base, usually stoic and unyielding, now felt like a maze of secrets, each corner holding potential clues. I knew my first step was to delve deeper into the quantum device and its mysteries. Returning to the lab, I was met with the cold, sterile environment, buzzing with the hum of the device. It stood there, an enigma wrapped in metal and wires, casting an ominous shadow in the fluorescent lighting. The more I studied the papers and schematics scattered around, the clearer it became. This device was capable of manipulating reality on a quantum level. It was a groundbreaking discovery, yet it was clear that something had gone horribly wrong. The scientist, or rather his shadow, was already there, his movements precise and mechanical. He greeted me with a nod, his eyes betraying a hint of something unidentifiable. As he spoke, explaining the intricacies of quantum entanglement and dimensional anomalies, I couldn't help but scrutinize his every word, every gesture. Was he aware of his true nature, I wondered, or was he as much a victim of his creation as the rest of us? Our conversation was interrupted by a sudden fluctuation in the device. The air around us seemed to vibrate, a tangible tension that set my nerves on edge. The scientist, unperturbed, quickly adjusted some controls, stabilizing the situation. But that moment of uncontrolled energy had been enough to confirm my worst fears. We were dealing with forces that we barely understood, let alone controlled. Later that day, I took a walk around the base, trying to clear my head. The snowy landscape, usually so serene, now seemed to conceal unknown dangers. The soldiers I passed seemed on edge, their casual banter replaced by hushed, anxious conversations. The effects of the device were spreading, its shadow reaching into every corner of our lives. That evening, I found myself drawn back to the lab. The scientist was gone, the room silent except for the low hum of the device. I stood there, alone, contemplating the enormity of our situation. We had opened a door to something new, something extraordinary, yet terrifying. The shadows, the duplications, they were just the beginning. We had tapped into a realm of reality that was never meant to intersect with ours. I left the lab with a heavy heart, the weight of our discovery bearing down on me. As I walked back to my quarters, the base seemed to whisper secrets, the shadows stretching out towards me as if beckoning. I realized then that we were far from understanding the true nature of what we had unleashed, and as the Alaskan night enveloped the base once more, I couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows were watching, waiting, biding their time. The chill of the early hours did little to quell the turmoil in my mind. The base, a labyrinth of secrets and shadows, felt more alien with each passing day. That morning, my shadow encounter took a deeply personal turn. As I walked through the compound, I saw it. My own shadow, but not quite. It moved like me, yet there was a coldness, a darkness that was not my own. It flickered with images, scenes from my past, that I had locked away. Memories of past missions, lost comrades, personal regrets, all laid bare in the stark morning light. I tried to dismiss it as stress, a trick of the mind, but the encounters grew more frequent, more vivid. It wasn't just me. Others on the base began sharing similar experiences. Soldiers were seeing shadows of themselves, reliving moments of fear, guilt, and pain. The atmosphere on the base grew heavy with an unspoken dread. We were trained to face tangible enemies, but how do you fight your own past? I found myself drawn back to the scientist and his lab. The man, or whatever he had become, seemed to hold the answers. He was surprisingly forthcoming, perhaps understanding that the situation was spiraling out of control. He explained that the device might be tapping into our quantum states, not just creating shadows, but also manifesting our past experiences and emotions. The revelation was staggering. We were not just dealing with a scientific anomaly, but with something that reached into the very essence of our being. The base, once a place of order and discipline, was now a stage for our darkest memories and fears to play out. As the days passed, the situation worsened. The shadows grew bolder, more tangible. Soldiers were found in states of shock, having confronted their shadow selves. The mental strain was palpable, the weight of unseen psychological warfare pressing down on us. One evening, in the quiet of my room, I reflected on the situation. The device, meant to be a tool for exploration and understanding, had become a weapon against our own minds. The line between reality and memory, between the present and the past, was blurring. I decided to confront the scientist again, demanding more answers, more solutions. But I found the lab deserted, papers scattered, the device humming ominously in the background. The scientist had vanished, leaving behind more questions than answers. That night, I lay awake, the whispers of the past echoing through my mind. The base, once a bastion of strength, felt like a prison of our own making. We had unleashed something we didn't understand, something that delved into the depths of our souls. As dawn broke, casting a pale light over the base, I knew we were at a turning point. We could no longer ignore the shadows, the echoes of our past. It was time to face them, to confront the truth of what we had done. But in the cold, early light, I couldn't help but wonder, were we ready to face what we would find? The base was restless, a simmering cauldron of tension and unease. The shadows had become more than mere apparitions. They were entities with a presence that was almost palpable. As I navigated through the day, the boundary between reality and the shadows continued to blur, making it hard to distinguish friend from phantom. In a bid to understand these phenomena, I began observing the shadows closely, noticing a pattern in their behavior. It wasn't random. There was a purpose, an intelligence behind their actions. They seemed to be communicating, coordinating. The idea was chilling. If these shadows were a collective entity, what was their purpose? My breakthrough came unexpectedly. While tracking my own shadow, it suddenly stopped mimicking me and started gesturing, as if trying to communicate. I cautiously engaged, and to my amazement, it responded. The shadow conveyed emotions and thoughts in a way that was alien yet understandable. It was a moment of eerie connection, a bridge between two worlds. Through this interaction, I learned that the shadows weren't just mindless replicas. They had thoughts, emotions, even memories, fragments of our own, yet distinct. They were like children, curious and learning, but also scared and confused. The realization was profound. We had created new life forms, beings that were a part of us, yet separate. As I shared my findings with the others, a mix of fear and wonder spread through the ranks. Some saw the shadows as a threat, others as a miracle of science. But one thing was clear: we needed to understand them better. One shadow in particular stood out. It seemed more aware, more keen to interact. I started to think of it as the sympathetic shadow. It was drawn to me, and in a strange way, I was drawn to it. Through our interactions, I began to piece together the nature of their existence. They were not just echoes of our past, they were living embodiments of our subconscious. The sympathetic shadow became my guide, showing me the world through its eyes. It was a surreal experience, seeing the base and its inhabitants from this otherworldly perspective. The shadows were not invading. They were exploring, trying to understand this world, just as we were trying to understand them. But not all were like the sympathetic shadow. Some were darker, echoes of pain and trauma. They lashed out, driven by fear and confusion. The base was becoming a battleground, not of guns and soldiers, but of minds and memories. As the day turned to night, I realized we were at a crossroads. We could either continue to fear and fight the shadows, or try to understand and coexist with them. The path forward was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the shadows were here to stay, and we had to find a way to live with the consequences of our creation. The night fell over the base, a cloak of silence, but my mind was anything but quiet, filled with thoughts of what the future would hold for us and our unexpected companions. The growing unrest on the base reached a tipping point, compelling me to take more drastic measures. The key, I believed, lay in the heart of the anomaly, the quantum device. I resolved to venture into the very phenomenon we had unwittingly unleashed. The preparation for this journey was unlike any other mission I had faced. It was not just a physical expedition but a venture into the unknown realms of reality. As I stepped closer to the device, the air around it vibrated with an energy that was almost tangible. The initial activation was disorienting. Reality seemed to warp and bend around me. Then, suddenly, I was there, in the shadow dimension. It was a mirror of our world, yet starkly different. Colors and sounds distorted as if underwater. This parallel dimension was both mesmerizing and unsettling. Navigating this shadow world was a challenge. The laws of physics seemed altered here, and the landscape shifted unpredictably. I encountered shadows, but they were different, more vivid, more complex. It was as if I was seeing the full essence of their being. The experience was disorienting, making me question what was real and what was a reflection. Then, a startling realization hit me. I was experiencing a dual consciousness. I could sense my presence in both dimensions simultaneously. It was a bizarre, split existence. In one realm, I was navigating the shadow dimension, while in another, I was still by the device, my team monitoring my progress. This duality of experience was overwhelming, challenging my perception of self and reality. My exploration revealed more than I anticipated. The shadow dimension was not just a replica of our world, it contained memories, emotions, and thoughts. It was a tapestry of human experience, woven from the subconscious of those connected to the device. This realm was a living, breathing manifestation of our inner worlds. In this dimension, I encountered various entities, some benign, curious, others darker, manifestations of fear and trauma. Each encounter was a deep dive into the psyche of their human counterparts, revealing stories of love, loss, courage, and despair. The climax of my journey came when I encountered a convergence point, a nexus where the energies of both dimensions were most intense. It was here that I realized the full potential and danger of the device. It wasn't just bridging two worlds, it was merging them, intertwining the fabric of reality and the essence of our being. Emerging from the shadow dimension was as disorienting as entering. The world I returned to felt altered, my perception of it forever changed. The experience had given me a profound insight into the nature of the shadows and the device, but it also left me with more questions. How do we coexist with these echoes of ourselves? What is the true nature of reality? That night, as I lay in my bunk, the base felt smaller, the world beyond it vaster and more mysterious than ever. We had touched something fundamental, something that transcended our understanding of science and reality. As I drifted into a restless sleep, my mind was a whirl of thoughts, reflecting on the journey and the new reality we had to face. The shadows were no longer just phantoms. They were a part of us, and we, a part of them. In the days following my return from the shadow dimension, the base was abuzz with unease. The shadows had become more assertive, their actions more coordinated. It was as if my journey had triggered a change in them, a newfound sense of purpose. I couldn't help but feel responsible, wondering if my intrusion had disrupted some delicate balance. The situation escalated when a group of shadows began to act out against their human counterparts. It was a rebellion of sorts, a clash of wills between our world and theirs. These shadows, once mere echoes, were now seeking autonomy, a chance to exist as entities in their own right. The base, already a powder keg of tension, was teetering on the brink of chaos. Amidst this turmoil, a new figure emerged, the Shadow Whisperer. This enigmatic entity appeared to have control over the shadows, guiding their actions with an unseen hand. The Whisperer was a mystery, its motives unclear. Was it a guardian of the shadows, a conductor of some grand orchestral play of consciousness? I sought out the sympathetic shadow, hoping for insight into this new development. Our communication had become more profound, transcending words. It conveyed feelings of confusion and fear among the shadows, a reflection of their human origins. The Whisperer, it seemed, was both a leader and a protector, a bridge between the two realms. The base commander, a man of action, was growing increasingly frustrated with the situation. He saw the shadows as a threat to be contained, not understanding the complexity of what we were dealing with. I found myself in a precarious position, mediating between the fears of the soldiers and the reality of the shadows' existence. As tensions rose, an incident shook the base. A group of shadows, under the Whisperer's influence, attempted to sabotage the quantum device. It was a desperate move, driven by their desire for independence. The confrontation that ensued was unlike any military engagement I had ever experienced, a battle of minds and wills. In the aftermath, the base was left in a state of heightened alert. The boundaries between our world and the shadow dimension were thinning, the interactions more frequent and intense. The Whisperer, once a figure of intrigue, had now become a symbol of the struggle we faced. That night, as I lay awake, the events of the day replaying in my mind, I pondered our next move. The shadows, with their rebellion and the Whisperer's guidance, were challenging our understanding of existence. We had to find a way to coexist, to bridge the gap between our worlds. But the path to that harmony was fraught with uncertainty and fear. As dawn broke, casting a soft light over the base, I realized that the conflict we faced was not just about control or science. It was a journey into the heart of what it means to be human, to exist. The shadows, with their echoes of our past and present, were not just anomalies. They were reflections of our deepest selves. The challenge we faced was not just to understand them, but to understand ourselves. The eerie calm that settled over the base in the wake of the recent events was misleading. With each day, the line between our world and the shadow dimension became increasingly blurred. The base, once a symbol of military order, was transforming into something unrecognizable, a place where reality was in constant flux. One morning, I woke to find the layout of the base subtly altered. Corridors twisted in unfamiliar ways. Rooms appeared where none had been before. It was as if the base itself had become a living entity, influenced by the energies of the quantum device. Navigating these ever-changing passageways became a daily challenge, a literal and metaphorical journey through a maze of uncertainty. The phenomenon of quantum entanglement presented itself in the most unexpected way. I found myself inexplicably linked to one of the soldiers, our emotions and physical sensations mirroring each other. This connection, though disconcerting, offered a unique perspective into the lives and struggles of others on the base. It was a vivid reminder of the interconnectedness of our existence, both in the physical world and beyond. The shadows, meanwhile, continued to evolve. I witnessed a startling event, a soldier merging with their shadow. This fusion created a being that was neither entirely human nor shadow, but a combination of both. The hybrid entity possessed insights into both realms, but also grappled with the duality that was overwhelming. It was a living embodiment of the complexities we were facing. This phenomenon of fusion brought new hope and new fear. Some saw it as a potential bridge between our worlds, a way to coexist. Others feared the loss of self, the blurring of lines between human and shadow. The base became divided in its opinion, a reflection of the larger conflict at play. The shadows were no longer just echoes of our past. They were active participants in our present. They influenced decisions, swayed emotions, and in some cases, took control. The base, once a place of clear command and structure, was now a battleground of wills, a place where every choice had far-reaching consequences. As I navigated this ever-changing landscape, I couldn't help but reflect on the nature of our existence. The shadows, with their capacity for emotion and thought, challenged our notions of consciousness and identity. What did it mean to be human in a world where the lines of reality were so blurred? One evening, as I sat alone in my quarters, the reality of our situation sank in. We had opened a Pandora's box, unleashing forces we barely understood. The base, our home and fortress, had become a testing ground for the very nature of reality. As I drifted off to sleep, the base seemed to pulse with unseen energy, the shadows moving in the darkness. We were at the edge of a new frontier, not just in science, but in understanding the human condition. The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. We could no longer view the world in simple terms. We were part of something much larger, much more complex. The dawn of a new understanding was upon us, and with it, the challenge to redefine our place in the universe. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, the base, once a stronghold of order, now felt like a crucible of change. The shadows and their human counterparts had reached an impasse, and the tension was palpable. It was clear that a resolution, one way or another, was imminent. The day brought a revelation that changed everything. The quantum device, the catalyst of all that had transpired, could only be deactivated from within the shadow dimension. This daunting task required someone to remain behind in that parallel world, a sacrifice that weighed heavily on us all. The decision of who would stay was a burden that seemed too great to bear. As we deliberated, the base was thrown into turmoil. The shadow whisperer, emboldened by our indecision, rallied the shadows for what seemed like a final confrontation. This was no ordinary battle. It was a clash of wills, a fight for coexistence. The air crackled with energy, the very atmosphere charged with the collective emotions of two intertwined worlds. I found myself at the heart of this maelstrom, torn between my duty as a soldier and my empathy for the shadows. The conflict escalated, with each side fighting not just for dominance, but for understanding and acceptance. The base became a surreal battlefield, where reality bent and twisted with the ebb and flow of the struggle. In the midst of the chaos, I made my decision. I would be the one to stay behind in the shadow dimension. It was a choice that came with a heavy heart, but also with a sense of purpose. I had come to understand the shadows, to see them not as enemies, but as reflections of ourselves, deserving of a chance to exist. The moment of transition was surreal. As I activated the device, reality shifted around me. I stepped into the shadow dimension, leaving behind the world I knew. The experience was indescribable, a fusion of senses and emotions that transcended physical boundaries. In the shadow dimension, I found a world of profound beauty and complexity. The shadows, now free from the fear of annihilation, welcomed me as one of their own. I became a bridge between two worlds, a guardian of the fragile balance we had achieved. From my new vantage point, I watched as the base slowly returned to normal, the quantum device deactivated. The shadows receded, but they didn't disappear. They remained, a part of our world, a reminder of the depth of our being. As I settled into my new existence, the memories of my life as a soldier, as a human, remained with me. They were echoes of a past life, but they shaped my new purpose. I was no longer just a soldier. I was a custodian of a new understanding, a witness to the boundless potential of our existence. The base, under the soft glow of dawn, was peaceful once more. The soldiers, my brothers and sisters in arms, continued their lives, forever changed by the events that had unfolded, and I, in the parallel world of shadows, watched over them, a silent guardian of the bridge we had built between our worlds. In the end, the journey was not just about facing the unknown or confronting our fears. It was about understanding the vastness of our existence, the interconnectedness of all things. We had touched the fabric of reality, and in doing so, had discovered the true depth of our own humanity.